Welcome back to Ancient Wisdom. Today, we're diving into one of the most profound dialogues between Eastern and Western thought. Carl Jung Meets Buddhism, how the self and no self can transform your mind. Have you ever wondered if the self that we cling to actually exists, or is it just an illusion created by countless temporary factors? Imagine a day when you realize that all your thoughts, emotions, and even your ego are not as fixed or permanent as you've always believed. How would that change the way you see yourself and the world around you? In today's podcast, we'll explore the fascinating meeting between Carl Jung, the great Western psychologist, and ancient Buddhist philosophy. Specifically, we'll delve into how Jung's theory of the self and the Buddha's teaching of no self complement each other to help humanity overcome suffering and achieve enlightenment. As Albert Einstein once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding." So, how can understanding the self and no self bring inner peace to each of us? Did you know that both Carl Jung and the Buddha offered powerful solutions to address human suffering? For example, think about Siddhartha Gautama, the young prince who left his luxurious palace to seek the truth of liberation. Could he have attained enlightenment if he had clung to the notion of a fixed self? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the connection between the self and no self? We'll continue the discussion in just a few moments. In 1939, in a quiet Truman, Switzerland, Carl Jung, regarded as one of the greatest Western psychologists, penned words that challenged every traditional understanding of human consciousness. After decades of treating patients and exploring the depths of psychology, Jung encountered an ancient truth from the East: the Buddhist doctrine of no self. This was a concept suggesting that the very self he had spent his life studying might merely be an illusion. This was not only a shocking revelation for a Western scientist but also a turning point that forced Jung to reflect deeply on his own theories. Contrary to expectations of outright rejection, Jung did not shy away from this idea. Instead, he referred to Buddhism as the most rational and direct religion. So what drew Jung, the psychologist who built his theories around the ego and psychological wholeness, to a philosophy that seemed entirely opposed to his work? Carl Jung was renowned for his theories of the collective unconscious and archetypes. He dedicated much of his life to exploring the deepest structures of the human mind, believing that the ego or self was the center of consciousness and psychological integrity, where conscious and unconscious aspects are unified. However, after years of relentless research, Jung noticed strange parallels between his discoveries and Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism. This became a pivotal moment in Jung's career. Ancient Buddhist texts, translated into English and German during his time, introduced him to a new perspective on consciousness and suffering. Among these, the Buddhist doctrine of no self posed a significant challenge to familiar Western psychological concepts. Is this self we cling to truly real, or is it merely an illusion created by the interplay of the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness? While Jung viewed the ego as the core of wholeness and a bridge to deeper self-awareness, Buddhism asserts that there is no such thing as a permanent self. According to the Buddha, every sense of self is merely a collection of impermanent phenomena, constantly changing and lacking any fixed essence. This is not just a philosophical idea but a truth experienced through meditation and direct observation. As a scientist, Jung could not ignore the similarities between his psychological theories and this doctrine. He realized that the suffering his patients experience, from anxiety and depression to feelings of disorientation, all stemmed from one common source: attachment to a fixed and changeable self. The encounter between Western psychology and Buddhist philosophy was not merely a cultural exchange, it was a collision of two perspectives on human nature. While Jung spent his life exploring psychological depths with the aim of integrating inner conflicts into unity, the Buddha taught transcending all attachments and seeing the true nature of no self in all phenomena. Surprisingly, rather than contradicting each other, these two viewpoints seemed to complement one another in unexpected ways. Jung realized that confronting this paradox opened up new depths in the journey to understand human consciousness. So, what happens when Jung's theory of the self meets the Buddhist teaching of no self? Are they truly opposites, or are they offering different pieces of a larger puzzle? More importantly, can the combination of these two perspectives help us better understand ourselves and achieve true enlightenment? As Carl Jung once reflected, the ultimate goal of Western psychology is the same as Eastern spiritual practice, to transform the mind from ego-centeredness to a greater state of wholeness. Could it be that both paths led to the same destination, where freedom lies not in becoming someone else, but in letting go of the illusions about who we think we are? Perhaps the answer lies within you, waiting to be uncovered. Carl Jung, a pioneer in psychology. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Carl Jung emerged as one of the most groundbreaking psychologists of the 20th century. His career began in the field of medicine, but soon pivoted to psychology under the influence of Sigmund Freud, often regarded as the father of psychoanalysis. Jung and Freud initially shared a close collaborative relationship, but their differing theoretical approaches eventually lead to a gradual estrangement. While Freud focused on unconscious elements tied to sexuality and fundamental human conflicts, Jung expanded the concept of the unconscious, viewing it as a collective and multimediation phenomenon that transcended individual experiences. This divergence laid the foundation for Jung to develop two of his most significant contributions to psychology: the theory of the collective unconscious and the concept of archetypes. Jung defined the collective unconscious as a deeper layer of the psyche, housing shared memories and universal patterns that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. These patterns, which he termed archetypes, manifest in dreams, myths, and folklore, reflecting fundamental templates of human experience. Some of the most famous archetypes Jung identified include the mother, the hero, the trickster, and the shadow. In Jung's framework, archetypes are not merely cultural symbols but foundational elements that shape how we perceive and interact with the world. Interestingly, these archetypes bear striking similarities to concepts in Eastern philosophy, particularly Buddhism. For instance, ideas like karma-dependent origination and the five aggregates sk and has in Buddhism describe how humans are influenced by recurring patterns of consciousness. This parallel is not coincidental. Jung's work was deeply enriched by his exposure to Eastern thought. Before delving deeply into Eastern philosophies, Jung was profoundly influenced by Arthur Schopenhauer, a 19th-century German philosopher who introduced many Buddhist ideas to the West. Schopenhauer was among the first in Western philosophy to emphasize suffering as an intrinsic part of the human experience, a perspective closely aligned with the Buddhist Four Noble Truths. Jung encountered Schopenhauer's works at a young age and was captivated by the philosopher's depiction of life as an endless cycle of suffering, which could only be transcended through the renunciation of desires. As Jung once remarked, "The world is a prison, and we are all inmates." This idea planted the seed for Jung's lifelong fascination with Eastern philosophies. For example, consider how Schopenhauer's emphasis on the impermanence of desires mirrors the Buddhist teaching of anicca, impermanence. Both perspectives suggest that clinging to fleeting pleasures or fixed identities leads to suffering. Jung's intellectual journey, therefore, can be seen as a bridge between Western psychology and Eastern wisdom, a synthesis that would later define much of his groundbreaking work. Jung's exploration of the unconscious and archetypes not only revolutionized psychology, but also invited humanity to look inward. As he famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This insight underscores the transformative power of self-awareness, a theme that resonates deeply with both Jungian psychology and Buddhist teachings. How might understanding these archetypes help us navigate our inner worlds? Could recognizing the shadow within ourselves lead to greater self-acceptance and wholeness? These questions invite us to reflect on the profound interconnectedness of Jung's theories and ancient Eastern philosophies. The intersection between Jung's theories and Buddhism. Around the 5th century BCE, Prince Siddhartha Gautama left his palace after witnessing old age, sickness, and death, determined to seek the truth of liberation. After years of ascetic practices that bore no fruit, he chose the middle way. Beneath the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya, he finally attained enlightenment, becoming the Buddha, the awakened one. The Buddha's enlightenment was not only the highest state of awareness but also encompassed a profound philosophical discovery: the truth of no self, Anatta. No self is one of the three marks of existence alongside impermanence and suffering. According to this teaching, what we call the self is merely a temporary combination of 5 elements, known as the 5 aggregates: form, physical matter, sensation, feelings, perception, cognition, mental formations, volitions, and consciousness. These elements are in constant flux, with none existing independently or permanently. Therefore, there is no fixed or eternal self. The Buddha emphasized that the mistaken belief in a permanent self is the root of all suffering, as it leads to attachment and fear. The doctrine of no self is not just a philosophical argument, it is also a practical method to free people from the bondage of these illusions. The concept of no self becomes clearer through the principle of dependent origination, one of the Buddha's most significant discoveries. Dependent origination explains that all phenomena arise due to their dependence on various conditions. Nothing exists independently or inherently. Everything is the result of a complex web of interdependence. For example, a flower cannot exist without sunlight, water, soil, and even an observer to perceive it. Similarly, what we call the self is merely a temporary collection of elements sustained by the continuous interaction between body and mind. When we look deeply into the nature of the self, we see that it has no fixed essence but is instead a continuous flow of phenomena. The Buddha's teaching of no self does not deny the existence of individuals, but rather helps people see the true nature of existence. This was a breakthrough not only in philosophy but also in its practical approach to liberation from suffering. By realizing that the self is an illusion, we can let go of attachments, judgments, and fears. This not only leads to inner freedom but also fosters deep compassion for all beings, as we understand that everyone is trapped in the same illusions and sufferings as we are. The influence of the no-self doctrine extends beyond religion, permeating philosophy, psychology, and even modern science. In philosophy, concepts of being and identity are re-examined when confronted with the idea that nothing exists independently. In psychology, no-self is studied as a way to reduce stress and improve mental health by helping people release negative thoughts related to the self. Meditation, a central practice in Buddhism, has been scientifically proven to alter the structure and function of the brain, making people more aware of the impermanent and no-self nature of experiences. Compared to Carl Jung's theory of the self, no-self may seem like an opposing viewpoint. However, in reality, the two share profound similarities. While Jung viewed the self as the center of consciousness and the starting point for exploring wholeness, the Buddha's no-self encourages practitioners to transcend all notions of self to achieve ultimate freedom. Both perspectives emphasize that clinging to a fixed self is the source of suffering and limits personal growth. Jung saw wholeness through the integration of inner conflicts, while the Buddha emphasized recognizing the impermanence and non-fixed nature of all phenomena. Both led to the same goal: liberation from the constraints of the mind. The teaching of no self, with its philosophical depth and practical applications, has transcended time and space to become one of the most revolutionary ideas in human history. The combination of profound philosophy and practical methods not only provides new insights into human nature but also offers a path to overcoming suffering and achieving true freedom. This opens the door for us to compare and engage in dialogue between the great systems of thought, Western psychology and Buddhist philosophy. Carl Jung in Buddhist philosophy, a profound dialogue. Throughout his exploration of psychology, Carl Jung was deeply intrigued by how Buddhist philosophy explained the nature of human consciousness, with concepts such as Anatta, no self, pratyaya samutippa, dependent origination, and liberation from suffering. These discoveries not only enriched Jung's thinking but also challenged the theories he had developed over many years. One of the most striking intersections between Jung's ideas and Buddhist thought lies in the similarity between the Buddha's concept of no self and Jung's theory of the unconscious. Buddhism teaches that the ego or self is merely an illusion, sustained by the temporary combination of the 5 aggregates pa, form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Similarly, Jung observed that the conscious ego is just the tip of the iceberg, with a collective unconscious lying deeper, containing universal patterns shared by all humanity. Both systems of thought emphasize that the mistaken belief in a fixed and changing self is the root cause of suffering and psychological imbalance. While Buddhism encourages practitioners to see through the impermanent nature of all phenomena to free themselves from attachment, Jung urged his patients to confront the unconscious parts of themselves, especially the shadow, those aspects denied or repressed to achieve psychological wholeness. Furthermore, there are notable parallels between Jung's concept of archetypes and the Buddhist notion of Dharma. According to Jung, archetypes are universal templates residing in the collective unconscious, manifesting as symbols in dreams, myths, and cultural expressions. They shape how we perceive and experience the world. In Buddhism, Dharma refers not only to teachings but also to fundamental principles governing the universe's existence. Both archetypes and Dharma serve as frameworks through which humans understand and interact with reality. This similarity becomes even more evident when Jung noticed that symbols like the mandala representing wholeness and harmony appear not only in Buddhist culture but also in the dreams and experiences of his Western patients. Engaging with Buddhist ideas did more than enrich Jung's theories. It transformed his understanding of human nature and consciousness. In the 1920s, Jung began studying Buddhist texts in English and German. He was captivated by how Buddhism not only explained suffering, but also offered practical methods to transcend it. Letters and journals from this period reveal a significant shift in Jung's thinking. From viewing the ego as the center of consciousness, he came to realize that clinging to the self could be the greatest obstacle to psychological growth. Jung wrote, "Buddhism seems to have reached depths that Western psychology has yet to touch." This did not mean he abandoned his theories. Rather, he sought to integrate them with Eastern philosophy, creating a more holistic approach. A clear example of this transformation is how Jung analyzed his patients' dreams and symbols. Previously, he focused on decoding personal elements, but after engaging with Buddhist philosophy, he began paying attention to universal pattern symbols that reflected not just individual experiences but also connected to deeper layers of consciousness. He observed that many of his patients, despite having no knowledge of Buddhism, produced images and symbols identical to those found in Buddhist scriptures, such as mandalas or varabhadis. This reinforced Jung's belief that human consciousness is not limited to individual factors, but is interconnected within a shared network of awareness that transcends time and space. While Buddhism emphasizes letting go and transcending the ego to attain enlightenment, Jungian psychology provides tools to understand and integrate different parts of the mind before achieving wholeness. Jung once remarked, "Buddhism does not deny the self as a temporary entity, but stresses that perceiving it as permanent and unchanging is a mistake." This powerful acknowledgement shows that these two systems of thought, rather than contradicting each other, open up a broader perspective on human nature. For instance, consider the story of Siddhartha Gautama, who left behind his royal life to seek liberation after witnessing old age, sickness, and death. His journey mirrors Jung's idea of confronting the shadow, the hidden, darker aspects of ourselves. Just as Siddhartha embraced meditation and introspection to uncover truth, Jung encouraged his patients to delve into their unconscious minds. Both paths led to profound self-awareness and transformation. By bridging Jungian psychology and Buddhist philosophy, we find a rich tapestry of insights that help us navigate the complexities of the human psyche. As Jung himself might have asked, what happens when we stop identifying with the ego and start seeing ourselves as part of something greater? This question invites us to explore the depths of our own consciousness, guided by the wisdom of both East and West. Ultimately, the dialogue between Carl Jung and Buddhist philosophy reminds us that true freedom comes not from reinforcing the ego but from transcending it. By integrating the tools of Jungian analysis with the timeless teachings of Buddhism, we can embark on a journey toward wholeness, compassion, and liberation, a journey where the boundaries of self dissolve, revealing the interdependence of all things. The integration of Jungian psychology and Buddhism, a holistic path. The intersection between Jung and Buddhism goes beyond theoretical discussions, offering profound practical significance. It reveals that the journey of self-discovery is not a solitary path confined to one specific ideology. Instead, it is a process that draws from multiple traditions, allowing us not only to better understand ourselves but also to transcend psychological and spiritual barriers. This raises an important question: How can these two ideologies coexist and complement each other to help humanity achieve true liberation? And here lies the magical point of convergence, Carl Jung's concept of the self and Buddhism's notion of no self. At first glance, these two perspectives seem entirely contradictory. One views the self as the center of consciousness, the key to achieving psychological wholeness. The other denies the existence of any fixed self, considering it merely an illusion that leads to suffering. However, when we delve deeper into the essence of both concepts, we uncover an intriguing paradox. Both are correct, and more importantly, they complement each other perfectly in addressing human suffering. Jung defines the self as the center of consciousness, where thoughts, emotions, memories, and perceptions of identity converge. In Jung's theory, the self is not just a necessary component but also a crucial tool for understanding and integrating different aspects of the psyche, particularly the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. According to him, individuals can only achieve wholeness when the self becomes aware of and integrates the repressed or suppressed parts of the unconscious, such as the shadow, enemy, animus, inner masculine or feminine images, and other archetypes into conscious awareness. This process, which he calls individuation, is a long but essential journey for each individual to reach a state of self-realization. On the other hand, Buddhism does not see the self as central, but rather as a temporary combination of the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The doctrine of no self asserts that there is no fixed entity that can be called I. The ego that we cling to is in essence an illusion sustained by ignorance and attachment. The Buddha taught that the mistaken perception of the self is the root cause of suffering, as it binds people to desires, fears, and disappointments. Instead of reinforcing the self, Buddhism encourages practitioners to let go of all notions of ego, thereby attaining enlightenment, state free from attachment and suffering. The difference between these two perspectives lies in their goals and approaches. While Jung emphasizes developing and integrating the self to achieve psychological wholeness, Buddhism focuses on transcending the self to attain ultimate freedom. This creates a paradox: one builds the self, while the other dismantles it. However, upon closer examination, we see that both approaches address the same issue: suffering caused by attachment to the ego. Jung does not deny that the self can become a source of suffering when it becomes too rigid or distorted by unresolved, unconscious elements. Similarly, Buddhism does not completely negate the existence of the self, but instead highlights that it lacks a fixed nature, and the misperception of it is the real problem. Both Jung and Buddhism agree that understanding the nature of the ego is the key to liberation from suffering. In Jung's theory, the process of individuation does not aim to make the self stronger but to help it recognize and integrate with other parts of the mind, leading to a state of wholeness that transcends the ordinary ego. Similarly, Buddhism uses meditation and introspection to help practitioners realize that the self is merely an illusion sustained by the aggregates, and from there, let go of all attachments to it. Jung acknowledged that Buddhist perspectives could illuminate the limitations of Western psychology. He wrote, "Buddhism not only helps people overcome the illusion of the self, but also opens up depths that psychology has yet to explore." The paradox between the self and no self becomes even clearer when we realize that both aim to address different aspects of the same problem. Jung focuses on helping his patients build a strong enough self to confront the repressed or suppressed parts of the unconscious. This is especially crucial for those struggling with inner chaos. When the self is weak or fragmented, it can lead to severe psychological disorders. Conversely, Buddhism emphasizes that even after the self is established, it remains an illusion that must be transcended to achieve enlightenment. These are not mutually exclusive goals, but rather the stages in a larger journey. Before one can let go of the ego, they must first understand and harmonize with it. Both perspectives complement each other profoundly. While Buddhism offers a comprehensive view of the impermanent non-self nature of all phenomena, Jungian psychology provides tools to understand and address specific aspects of the human mind. Jung helps individuals confront the hidden parts of their psyche, while Buddhism guides them in transcending all limitations of the ego to achieve ultimate freedom. When combined, they create a holistic path that allows individuals to harmonize with themselves while overcoming illusions about who they are. This integration is not only theoretically meaningful, but also deeply practical in daily life. We often face internal conflicts, feelings of anxiety, and attachments to ideas about ourselves. Jungian psychology helps us recognize and confront the hidden parts of our minds, while Buddhism teaches us to let go of rigid notions about ourselves to live more freely. The combination of these two approaches offers a powerful way to overcome suffering, helping us not only understand ourselves better, but also live more harmoniously and meaningfully. Conclusion. The combination of Jungian psychology and Buddhist philosophy not only brings philosophical discoveries, but also provides practical tools to address everyday challenges. Both systems aim to help people confront and overcome inner conflicts while achieving peace and freedom of mind. Below are ways in which practices from these two systems can be applied in real life to bring about significant changes. One of the most famous methods in Jungian psychology is active imagination. This technique allows individuals to communicate with the unconscious parts of their minds through guided visualization. In practice, participants focus on a specific image, dream, or feeling, then allow related ideas and images to naturally emerge. This process helps them access archetypes or the shadow, the parts rejected or repressed in the unconscious, and integrate them into consciousness. It is particularly effective in resolving internal conflicts or seeking deeper meaning in life. Similarly, Buddhist meditation offers a method to observe and understand the nature of the mind. A common technique is vipassana, where practitioners focus their attention on the breath, bodily sensations, or thoughts and emotions that arise in the mind. By observing without judgment, practitioners can recognize the impermanent and non-self nature of all phenomena. This technique not only reduces stress and anxiety but also helps people let go of rigid notions about themselves, leading to a freer and lighter way of living. The intersection between Jung's active imagination and Buddhist meditation lies in their focus on consciousness and confronting deep aspects of the mind. While active imagination encourages active engagement with images and symbols, meditation emphasizes observation and letting go. Combining these two methods creates a unique balance. It helps people explore hidden parts of their minds while creating distance, so they don't get caught up in negative emotions or thoughts. For example, someone who frequently feels anxious about the future can use active imagination to visualize the source of their worry. They might encounter symbols in their mind representing fear, insecurity, or past memories contributing to this feeling. Then, by using meditation, they can observe these emotions and thoughts without judgment, gradually realizing that they are not their true essence but temporary phenomena. This combination not only helps them better understand themselves, but also alleviates psychological pressure. Next, the concept of archetypes, a key idea in Jungian psychology, can also be applied in daily life by identifying recurring behavioral patterns or symbols appearing in dreams, art, or relationships. For instance, someone who frequently dreams of being lost in a forest may realize that this symbolizes disorientation or fear in their waking life. By recognizing this archetype, they can uncover its deeper cause and find ways to confront it. In Buddhism, practicing non-self brings significant benefits to relationships and daily work. By realizing that everyone is influenced by similar illusions and delusions, we can reduce judgment and cultivate compassion. For example, in conflict situations, instead of reacting from the ego and trying to prove ourselves right, we can apply Buddhism's attitude of letting go to realize that the conflict doesn't necessarily relate to our true nature. Sometimes it's just a fleeting emotion, not something we truly want. This approach helps resolve difficult situations more peacefully and effectively. Many modern therapists have combined Jungian methods with Buddhist meditation to help patients reduce stress, process trauma, and develop self-awareness. A therapist might guide a patient to use active imagination to visualize a painful past situation. Then, using meditation, they help the patient release negative emotions tied to that memory. As a result, patients not only gain a clearer understanding of the problem's origin, but also feel liberated from psychological burdens. These practical applications show that Jungian psychology and Buddhist meditation are not just abstract concepts, but powerful tools for transforming life. By combining Jung's deep understanding of the mind with Buddhist wisdom on non-self, we can learn to face daily challenges with greater clarity and compassion. Most importantly, both approaches encourage us to explore ourselves and seek answers within, as the journey to freedom and wholeness begins with understanding the mind and releasing its constraints. Remember, as Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And the Buddha taught, "Be your own lamp." These two statements, though different in expression, point to one ultimate truth. The journey of self-discovery is the key to achieving true freedom. So are you ready to embark on this journey? Try incorporating active imagination and meditation into your daily routine. You'll be amazed at the positive changes they bring. To systems of thought, one common destination. Carl Jung and Buddhist philosophy, despite originating from two different cultures and contexts, converge at a crucial common point: the quest for truth about human nature and the path to psychological freedom. Through analytical psychology, Jung explored how the ego and unconscious elements interact, creating inner conflicts. Meanwhile, Buddhism, with its doctrine of no self, pointed out that clinging to an illusory self is the root cause of suffering. Though differing in their approaches, both paths led to the same destination: liberating individuals from the constraints of the mind and opening the door to true freedom. The intersection between Jungian psychology and Buddhism not only sheds light on questions of consciousness, but also provides practical tools to confront daily suffering. Jung encouraged people to face their shadow, the repressed parts of the unconscious, and integrate them into consciousness to achieve wholeness. On the other hand, Buddhism teaches that suffering ceases when we realize the self is merely an illusion and let go of all attachments. These two approaches are not contradictory but complementary. One helps us understand and harmonize with ourselves, while the other shows us how to transcend the boundaries we have created within ourselves. From a deeper perspective, both Jung and Buddhism emphasize that psychological freedom does not come from changing the external world, but from inner transformation. Jung referred to this as self-realization, the process of individuation and integrating unconscious elements into the conscious mind. Buddhism calls it enlightenment, a clear understanding of the impermanent and non-self nature of all phenomena. Both agree that suffering is not a fixed state but the result of mistaken perceptions. When we change how we view ourselves and the world, suffering dissipates. However, what makes these two systems of thought so powerful is not just their abstract ideas, but their practical applicability. From using Jung's active imagination to explore the unconscious to practicing Buddhist mindfulness meditation to recognize the no-self, everyone can find methods suited to confronting anxiety, stress, and conflict in everyday life. These tools not only help individuals better understand themselves but also lead to a freer life, where we are no longer bound by the stories we have constructed about our egos. Jung once wrote, "The ultimate goal of Western psychology is the same as Eastern spiritual practice, transforming the mind from ego-centeredness to a greater state of wholeness." Buddhism expresses the same truth in gentler terms: see the world as a bubble, as a dream, and you will transcend suffering. These two systems of thought are like two sides of the same coin, both aiming for a common goal: freeing humanity from psychological constraints to live a life of freedom, compassion, and meaning. Thus, the end of this journey is not about choosing between Jung or Buddhism, but about how you use the wisdom from both to transform your own life. Freedom does not lie in trying to become someone else, but in letting go of illusions about yourself, realizing that you have always been complete and whole in your very essence. Who are you when there is no longer a story about yourself? Let this question become the guiding torch for your journey of discovery, opening up a world where freedom and peace are always ready to welcome you. Through the dialogue between Carl Jung and Buddhist philosophy, we've discovered that despite coming from different perspectives, both aim for a common goal: helping humanity overcome suffering and achieve inner freedom. While Jung emphasizes integrating the self to achieve psychological wholeness, Buddhism teaches us to let go of the self to recognize the impermanent nature of all phenomena. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, "The future depends on what you do today." So start your journey of self-discovery now by applying lessons from both Western psychology and Eastern philosophy. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to Ancient Wisdom, and share this video with your friends. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts on this topic. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on this journey so far. And don't go anywhere, because an exciting discussion on how to apply these principles to everyday life will begin in just a few moments. See you soon.